Caraxi had spent 300 years teaching their children to fear one species above all others. Humans. Their history books called them the Star Monsters. Their soldiers said humans did not negotiate when cornered. Their diplomats claimed humans smiled before war. And every Caraxi child knew the oldest warning. If a human fleet ever appears in your sky, run. Tonight, 12,000 Caraxi soldiers were about to discover whether the stories were true. The battlefield above Vera 9 was almost completely silent. Thousands of Caraxi warships surrounded a single human battle group. At the center floated the human flagship, UNS Resolute, battered but still operational. Its armor was scorched. Several engines were burning. Yet it remained perfectly still. Across the Caraxi command bridge, General Threx watched the human ship through a massive tactical display. "Why aren't they running?" his tactical officer whispered. Threx narrowed his eyes. Because that was what terrified him. The humans should have fled. Instead, the Resolute simply waited. Then the Caraxi fleet opened fire. A wall of blue-white energy crossed the darkness. The human flagship disappeared behind a storm of explosions. Caraxi soldiers cheered. They're finished. But when the smoke cleared, the Resolute was still there. Damaged. Burning. Alive. Then a transmission appeared on every Caraxi screen. Admiral Elias Vance. His face was calm. "General Threx," he said, "you have 30 seconds to withdraw your fleet." The bridge erupted in laughter. Threx leaned toward the screen. "You are surrounded by 17,000 warships, human." Vance didn't answer. Instead, his eyes shifted slightly toward another display. Something had caught his attention. A damaged Caraxi carrier was drifting behind the main fleet. Its hull was torn open. Its engines were dead. And strange emergency signals were coming from inside. Vance's expression changed. "What's aboard that carrier?" he asked. Threx hesitated. "That is none of your concern." Vance stared at him. "Are there civilians aboard?" Silence. Then the Caraxi sensors detected the truth. The carrier was filled with younglings. Hundreds of them. Some were trapped inside sealed emergency chambers. The human bridge went completely silent. An officer approached Vance. "Admiral, we can destroy the carrier before their fleet reaches us." Vance slowly turned toward him. "No. Sir." The Admiral looked at the burning alien ship. "Prepare rescue teams." The officer froze. "Those are enemy children." Vance's voice became colder. "I know." Across the battlefield, General Threx watched the humans redirect their ships. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Caraxi had no idea what humanity was going to do. Then another signal appeared. A second Caraxi fleet had just entered the system. And their weapons were already charging. They weren't coming to rescue the children. They were coming to kill them. The second Caraxi fleet emerged from hyperspace like a wall of black steel. Thousands of warships appeared above Vera 9. Their arrival should have been a relief. Instead, General Threx felt his stomach tighten. He recognized the markings. The Purification Fleet. These were not rescue ships. They were executioners. "Open a priority channel," Threx ordered. A cold-faced Caraxi commander appeared on the screen. Lord Kale. He didn't even look at the damaged carrier. "General Threx," Kale said, "stand down." Threx stared at him. "There are civilians aboard." Kale's expression didn't change. "There are contaminated civilians aboard." The bridge became silent. Threx's claws tightened around his command chair. "Children," he said. "There are children aboard." Kale finally looked toward the damaged carrier. "Then their suffering will end quickly." Threx couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You intend to destroy them?" "We intend to prevent human capture." Across the battlefield, Admiral Vance received the same transmission. His officers waited for his reaction. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was badly outnumbered. 2 Caraxi fleets. Thousands of enemy weapons. 1 crippled carrier. Hundreds of trapped younglings. And barely enough human ships to survive a direct engagement. "Admiral," Captain Reyes said quietly, "if we move toward that carrier, they'll surround us." Vance nodded. "I know. We could lose the fleet." "I know. Then why are we doing this?" Vance looked through the bridge window. The distant carrier was burning against the darkness. "Because someone has to." The Resolute accelerated. 1 human ship followed. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire human formation began moving toward the doomed carrier. The Caraxi fleet watched in disbelief. The monsters were going back. Not to attack. To rescue. Kale immediately gave the order. Fire. Thousands of weapons ignited. The darkness became a sea of blue energy. Human shields flared. One cruiser took a direct hit. Its armor ruptured. Another ship moved into its path and absorbed the next barrage. The human fleet began forming a protective corridor around the damaged carrier. Inside the Caraxi ship, terrified younglings pressed against emergency windows as explosions shook their shelter. A small Caraxi girl looked toward the burning stars. Then something enormous appeared outside. A human rescue craft. Its landing lights pierced through the smoke. The craft touched the carrier's hull. The doors opened. Human soldiers stepped out. The younglings screamed. They had been taught that humans were monsters. But the first human soldier did something completely unexpected. He removed his helmet. Slowly, he raised both empty hands. Then he knelt. He didn't speak. He simply waited. One frightened youngling cautiously stepped forward. Then another. But before the humans could reach them, the carrier suddenly shook violently. A warning appeared across every screen. Reactor failure, 417 remaining. And deep inside the ship, something began moving toward the children. The first explosion threw the human rescue team across the corridor. Red emergency lights flashed. Metal screamed. And somewhere beyond the walls, the carrier's reactor began counting down. 3:58. Move! Lieutenant Mara Chen shouted. The younglings were huddled behind her, trembling as another blast shook the deck. Mara looked toward the corridor. Smoke poured from a ruptured ventilation shaft. Something had moved through it. Something large. One of the Caraxi children pointed with a shaking claw. Guardian. Mara turned. A massive security machine emerged from the smoke. Its armored body was covered in Caraxi insignia, and its weapons were already active. The carrier's defense system had identified everyone inside as hostile. Including the children. Get them behind me. Mara shouted. The machine raised its weapon. Mara stepped forward. Her rifle remained lowered. She knew one wrong shot could rupture the reactor chamber. Easy, she whispered. The machine fired. Mara's squad dove aside. The blast tore through the wall. The younglings screamed. Then something unexpected happened. A tiny Caraxi boy ran forward. Mara grabbed him before he reached the machine. He was holding a small metal pendant. The machine suddenly stopped. Its targeting system flickered. The pendant carried the insignia of the carrier's former commander. The boy whispered something in Caraxi. Mara didn't understand the words. But the machine did. Its weapon lowered. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the machine turned away. It wasn't attacking them. It was protecting the children. Mara looked at the countdown. 2:51. Everybody move. The rescue team began pushing toward the emergency hangar. But the route was blocked. A massive section of the ship had collapsed. Mara contacted the Resolute. Admiral, we've got a problem. Vance's voice came through the static. How many? 312 younglings. A pause. Can you get them out? Mara looked at the collapsed passage. No. Vance didn't hesitate. Then we'll come to you. Mara's eyes widened. Sir, your flagship is under direct attack. I know. Your shields won't survive another barrage. I know. Admiral. Vance interrupted. Hold your position. Outside, the human fleet was barely surviving. Caraxi weapons hammered the defensive formation. Then the Resolute suddenly broke away. Every Caraxi commander watched as the enormous human flagship accelerated directly toward the damaged carrier. Kale smiled. They've made a mistake. But General Threx wasn't smiling. He watched the human ship's trajectory. Then he understood. They aren't attacking us. The Resolute's engines reached maximum power. Vance was heading straight for the carrier. They're going to crash into it. The human flagship struck the damaged carrier. Instead of destroying it, massive docking clamps locked into place. A bridge opened between the two ships. Vance had just turned his flagship into an evacuation tunnel. But the countdown continued. 1:47. And the carrier's reactor had begun to crack. The entire Caraxi carrier shook as the human flagship locked itself against its dying hull. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then the carrier's emergency system screamed. Reactor containment failure. 142. Mara stared at the countdown. Move. Move. The younglings began running toward the newly opened passage. Human soldiers formed 2 lines around them. Behind the children, the ancient security machine followed silently. Outside, the battle had become a nightmare. The purification fleet had realized what Admiral Vance was doing. Kale's voice thundered across every Caraxi channel. Destroy the human flagship. Thousands of weapons turned toward the Resolute. General Threx immediately objected. There are children aboard. Kale answered coldly. Then the humans have chosen their fate. The weapons fired. A massive wave of energy struck the human formation. The Resolute's shields erupted like a second sun. The ship groaned under the impact. Inside the flagship, lights flickered. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Vance gripped the command rail. How long? Shield integrity at 32%. Keep the bridge open. Admiral, if we maintain the corridor, the ship will break apart. Vance looked toward the evacuation counter. 312 children. Then we break apart after they're safe. On the other side of the bridge, Mara was carrying an injured youngling. She could hear the human ship tearing itself apart. The walls shook. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Yet the children kept moving. Then one of them stopped. A tiny Caraxi girl looked through a viewport. She could see the human ship surrounding them. Not attacking. Protecting. Thousands of human sailors were dying to keep the corridor open. The girl whispered a word. Mara looked down. What did she say? A Caraxi translator beside her answered. She said. He hesitated. She thought monsters were supposed to be cruel. Mara looked at the child. Then she smiled faintly. So did we. A violent explosion suddenly tore through the carrier. The evacuation bridge tilted. Several children fell. Human soldiers caught them before they reached the broken edge. But the reactor countdown reached its final minute. 0:59. Vance received another message. Admiral. The reactor cannot be stabilized. Vance looked at the tactical screen. Then he noticed something. The reactor wasn't simply failing. Someone had deliberately overridden its safety systems. Someone had forced the carrier into a controlled overload. His eyes narrowed. Who accessed the reactor controls? No one answered. Then the security machine suddenly transmitted a message. A single identification code appeared. General Threx. Vance stared at the screen. Threx. The Caraxi general's face appeared on the communication channel. He looked terrified. I didn't do it. Vance's expression hardened. Then who did? Threx looked behind him. His officers were frozen. Then every alarm on the Caraxi fleet activated simultaneously. A new enemy fleet had entered the system. And its target wasn't humanity. It was the children. The stars vanished. Not because the battlefield had gone dark. Because something enormous had arrived. Beyond the burning Caraxi fleet, hundreds of black warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their hulls were unlike anything General Threx had ever seen. No Dominion insignia. No diplomatic codes. No identification. Just one symbol painted across every ship. A white circle split by a single black line. The bridge went silent. Threx whispered, the Null Fleet. Even Lord Kale looked afraid. Admiral Vance heard the transmission. Who are they? Threx answered immediately. An ancient faction the Dominion believed extinct. Why are they here? Threx looked toward the damaged carrier. They don't want the carrier. His voice trembled. They want what's inside it. The younglings. Vance's expression hardened. Then they chose the wrong target. The Null Fleet opened fire. Their weapons weren't aimed at the human ships. They were aimed directly at the evacuation corridor. The first projectile struck the carrier. The entire ship lurched. Mara fell against the wall. Children screamed. A section of the corridor collapsed. Keep moving, she shouted. Human soldiers formed a living barrier as debris rained around them. Outside, Admiral Vance watched another null weapon charging. Evasive maneuver. The Resolute tried to move. It couldn't. The docking clamps had fused with the carrier. Vance looked at his tactical officer. Can we separate? Negative. The connection is permanent. Another weapon charged. Vance understood. The flagship was trapped. The next shot would destroy both ships. Bring every remaining shield generator online. Sir, that could overload the reactor. Vance didn't blink. Do it. The human ship's shields expanded. A massive blue barrier formed between the carrier and the approaching weapon. The null projectile struck. For one terrifying moment, the shield held. Then cracks spread across it. Inside the carrier, Mara saw the ceiling begin collapsing. She grabbed the nearest child. Run! The youngling surged forward. Only 60 remained. The evacuation chamber was just ahead. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. A child's voice whispered. Are the monsters still here? Mara switched on her emergency lamp. Her face appeared in the darkness. No. She looked at the frightened children. Your protectors are. The children moved again. Outside, the human fleet was beginning to collapse. One cruiser exploded. Then another. General Threx stared at the battlefield. Human ships were dying. Caraxi ships were dying. But the humans refused to retreat. Something inside him finally broke. He opened every Dominion channel. All Caraxi ships, protect the human fleet. Kale stared at him. You would betray the Dominion. Threx looked toward the carrier. No. He raised his weapon. I'm protecting our future. Across the battlefield, thousands of Caraxi ships turned. For the first time, humanity was no longer standing alone. But aboard the carrier, the reactor countdown reached 0:10. And Admiral Vance saw something impossible on his tactical display. The Null Fleet's flagship was opening its hangar. Something massive was coming out. The object emerging from the Null Fleet's flagship was larger than a human cruiser. Then larger than a battleship. Then the darkness around it revealed the truth. It was a planetary siege vessel. Its armored hull unfolded like the petals of some enormous mechanical predator, exposing a core of white energy. Every sensor aboard the Resolute began screaming. Admiral, the tactical officer whispered, that's not a weapon. Vance stared at the readings. What is it? The officer swallowed. It's a reactor extraction device. Vance's eyes narrowed. The machine wasn't designed to destroy the carrier. It was designed to rip the reactor out while the ship was still alive. And the children were trapped only meters away. Can we destroy it? Not without destabilizing the carrier. Vance looked at the countdown. 0:07. Then we don't destroy it. He turned toward the main viewport. We destroy the ship carrying it. The human fleet opened fire. Caraxi warships joined them. Thousands of weapons crossed the battlefield. The Null Fleet answered with a wall of energy. Human and Caraxi ships began disappearing. But the massive extraction vessel kept moving. It reached the carrier. Mechanical arms slammed into the hull. The entire ship screamed. Inside, Mara was thrown against a bulkhead. She looked toward the evacuation chamber. Only 12 children remained. Come on. She grabbed 2 of them and ran. Behind her, the security machine suddenly stopped. Its sensors turned toward the reactor. Mara shouted, "Move." The machine didn't move. Instead, it transmitted a message. A hidden recording appeared on Mara's helmet. A Caraxi scientist appeared. His face was old. Terrified. If you're seeing this, he said, the Null Fleet has found us. Mara froze. The children are not merely survivors. Her eyes widened. They are carriers. The recording continued. Every one of these younglings carries genetic adaptations that can survive environments no known species can. Mara stared at the children. The scientist continued. The Null Fleet believes their DNA can be used to create soldiers capable of surviving any world. Mara finally understood. This wasn't an execution. It was an abduction. The Null Fleet wanted to turn the children into weapons. She looked toward the remaining younglings. No. The security machine suddenly moved. Its ancient armor opened. Inside was a hidden control core. The machine wasn't just a guardian. It was the carrier's original commander AI. And it had one final command. Protect the younglings. Outside, Vance saw the extraction vessel lock onto the carrier. Captain. Sir. Detach the carrier. We can't. Vance looked at the battlefield. Then at the damaged flagship. Then at the children. Then we're going to move both. The Resolute's engines ignited beyond safe limits. The human flagship began dragging the entire Caraxi carrier through space. Every remaining human and Caraxi ship formed a protective wall behind them. The Null fleet fired again. Vance gave one final order. Take us into the star. His crew stared at him. Ahead of them burned a massive blue-white sun. Behind them came the entire Null fleet. And Admiral Vance was about to turn the star itself into a weapon. The star filled the view screen. A colossal sphere of blue-white fire, its surface boiling with storms powerful enough to tear planets apart. Behind the human flagship, the damaged Caraxi carrier was barely holding together. Behind both ships came the Null fleet. Hundreds of black warships. Thousands of weapons. And one purpose. The children. Distance to stellar corona? Vance asked. 30 million kilometers. Keep going. His tactical officer stared at him. Admiral, if we enter the corona, our shields won't survive. Vance didn't turn. They don't have to. The officer finally understood. Vance wasn't planning to survive the star. He was planning to make the Null fleet believe he was going to. The Resolute accelerated. Its engines screamed. The carrier's hull began glowing red. Inside, Mara struggled to keep the remaining younglings calm. The security AI spoke through the corridor. External temperature rising. Mara looked toward the ceiling. How long? 3 minutes until structural failure. She looked at the children. Then we have 3 minutes. Outside, the Null fleet followed. Their commander transmitted a message. Human Admiral. Surrender the children. Vance answered. No. You cannot escape. I know. You will destroy yourself. Vance looked at the star. That is not the same thing as losing. The Null fleet fired. A storm of weapons crossed the darkness. Human and Caraxi ships moved into their path. The explosions illuminated the battlefield. General Threx watched his remaining fleet disappear one ship at a time. He could have retreated. Instead, he gave a simple order. Stay with the humans. One Caraxi officer stared at him. Why? Threx looked at the carrier. Because they stayed with us. The fleet followed. Then the Resolute crossed the first edge of the stellar corona. Every system screamed. Shields dropped. Armor began melting. The carrier nearly broke apart. But Vance kept going. The Null fleet followed. Then something strange happened. Their ships began losing power. Their weapons shut down. Their engines flickered. The tactical officer suddenly shouted. Admiral. Vance turned. What? The star's magnetic field is disrupting them. Vance smiled. The Null fleet had built its technology to survive conventional space. But their advanced weapons depended on artificial magnetic stabilizers. The star was destroying those stabilizers. Now, Vance said. Every human and Caraxi ship turned. They fired simultaneously. The battlefield became a wall of light. The Null fleet's formation shattered. Their extraction vessel lost control. It crashed into the carrier. The impact tore open the reactor chamber. Mara felt the deck disappear beneath her. She grabbed the nearest child. The others fell toward the opening. Then the security AI activated its final protocol. Its entire body expanded into a protective shield around the younglings. The machine burned. Piece by piece. But it held. Mara screamed for help. Suddenly, a human rescue team appeared. Admiral Vance himself stepped through the smoke. He had left the bridge. He was carrying an emergency oxygen tank. Mara stared at him. Admiral, the ship is dying. Vance looked at the children. Then toward the collapsing reactor. We have one chance. He pointed toward the escape tunnel. Get them to the shuttle. Mara hesitated. What about you? Vance looked back at the reactor. I'll close the door. And behind him. The reactor exploded. The explosion swallowed the corridor. For one terrifying second, Mara saw nothing but white fire. Then the emergency doors slammed shut. The blast stopped. Silence followed. Mara looked around. The children were alive. The security AI was gone. But Admiral Vance was nowhere to be seen. Admiral? Nothing. She ran toward the sealed reactor door. Admiral Vance. Still nothing. Then a weak transmission crackled through her helmet. "Stop shouting." Mara froze. A damaged camera flickered to life. Vance was lying beneath twisted metal on the other side of the door. His uniform was burned. Blood covered one side of his face. But he was smiling. "Are the children out?" Mara looked toward the evacuation shuttle. "Yes." Vance closed his eyes for a moment. "Good." Outside, the battle had ended. The Null fleet was broken. Their flagship drifted powerless near the star. The remaining Caraxi and human ships surrounded it. General Threx opened a channel. "Admiral Vance." Vance slowly looked toward the screen. Threx lowered his head. "My people were wrong about humanity." Vance gave a tired smile. "Your people aren't the first." Threx paused. "Why did you save them?" Vance looked toward the children visible through the shuttle window. "Because they needed someone to." The answer was so simple that Threx didn't know what to say. For generations, the Caraxi had believed humanity's greatest strength was violence. They had studied human weapons, human fleets, human wars. They had completely misunderstood. Humanity wasn't feared because humans loved destruction. Humanity was feared because humans could walk into hell itself. And still choose to protect someone standing beside them. Weeks later, the surviving Caraxi younglings were returned home. But something unexpected happened. They refused to call humans monsters. They called them guardians. The story spread across the Dominion. Children who had once been taught to hide from human ships now stood beneath them in awe. The Caraxi Council eventually sent an ambassador to Earth. Not to negotiate surrender. Not to demand reparations. But to ask for an alliance. The ambassador brought a small gift. A broken piece of the ancient security machine. On it was engraved a single sentence. "You protected our children when we could not." Admiral Vance kept the fragment aboard the Resolute. Years later, it became part of the first human Caraxi Academy. Above its entrance stood another inscription. "Strength is not measured by how many enemies you can destroy. It is measured by how many lives you refuse to abandon." And that was the lesson the galaxy finally learned. Humanity had never been the monsters. The real monsters were those who believed compassion made a species weak. Because when the galaxy finally tested humanity, humanity didn't answer with its strongest weapon. It answered with a child in its arms. And somehow, that was far more terrifying.